Okay, so thank you so much, by the way, for answering these questions.
Right.
These are just questions that have come to my mind when recently realizing that some people actually think it's normal to observe or to be a part of a polygamous environment or relationship or family. So, you know, you can imagine, and you live in the society as well. So you can imagine coming from a context of monogamy and approaching this. So this is what leads to question number 14.
Okay.
If a man can't stick to one wife or 3 wives or 100 wives, what prevents him from having an unlimited number?
Well, what is his goal? When you marry,
His goal might be to get his wiggle on.
well, that's not polygyny.
Okay.
So, while I don't believe that there is a limitation to how many women you could take on, at a certain point you have to be practical with yourself.
Okay.
And, you know, at a certain point, if you're not going to love a woman and plan to love a woman and plan to bring her happiness, then all you have done is disrupted somebody's life. And that's not right. And so, you know.
So if a man lacks self-control, basically, are you actually saying that if a man lacks self-control, then polygyny is not for him?
Absolutely. I'm saying if a man lacks self-control, marriage is not for him. Monogamy, polygyny, or otherwise. You have to have a certain level of self-control, certain level of maturity. That's what I said. When you decide to get into a relationship, what does a relationship mean to you? Because if you stop and you apply the aspects of a relationship, you'll know. I'm looking to get use your words, I'm looking to get my wiggle on. You sit down and be like,
I borrowed that from my big little brother, by the way.
And then the next thing you know, it's like, oh, but I'm going to have a conversation with her about her life, you know, what she expects from me, what she expects out of this relationship, how long she expects it to last. Well, listen, most men, if they really like just trying to like wiggle and go, they ain't getting into all of that. They're like, hey, listen, can we make this happen? Right? And so I stop and I say that unlimited number, you wouldn't, man. I'm not going to say men don't do it because I can't speak for all men on this aspect, but like, oh yeah, I plan to have 45 wives. I think 45 is a nice round number. Like, listen, stop it. You're like, if you plan to love somebody plans to love you, then sure, it can work. But if you don't, then that's wrong. So what would prevent a man from taking an unlimited number?
Yeah.
Hopefully righteousness. The fact that you wouldn't want to hurt. That's the empathy we were just talking about, right? You wouldn't want to hurt a woman and disrupt her life so much that she would hate you or despise the fact that you interrupted everything that she wanted for herself because she's seen that in you. And so a lot of men need to understand that aspect, that when you communicate and when you're truthful, at least a woman could say, the man was honest with me and I was allowed to make a decision about what I wanted to do.
Okay, so for all the single ladies out there, I sound like a Quiet Storm person. For all the single ladies. But for all the single ladies out there listening, it sounds like if you can actually put your mind in a position to equate, to think that polygamy can be in the same boat as the word righteousness. If you even have that as a starting point, then it sounds like what Moray is saying is if you're interested in that kind of relationship, look for righteousness, look for a righteous character. And that will hopefully solve a lot of issues before they even come up. But let's get specific about some things that are important in terms of the way that polygyny is carried out. This is question number 15. If you have several wives who have kids around the same time, which of course is very possible, you have several wives and they're giving birth to children around the same time, how do you care for multiple families and or households? And I say that because we have to remember that wives stop working when they're responsible for newborns. So these wives' income, some of them leave their jobs, but even temporarily, their income isn't coming in. So of course that falls on this one man and all of these women and all of these children. So if you have several wives who have kids around the same time, how do you care for multiple families and multiple households?
Okay, so some people plan, some people don't. Sometimes you're like, okay, this is when I'm going to have a child. And if you do that, part of that should be part of saving, understanding you're going to be out of work, creating a nest egg, so to speak, in a proverbial sense, where you have this money that would cover for the period that the woman is not working, provided she works at all. Because some women never work.
Outside of the home, that is.
Right.
Because inside the home is 24/7.
Correct. Now, there's also residual income. So I stop and I say, you know, sometimes we have this conversation, but there are some people who actually have money already.
Yeah.
You know, we come
Passive streams of income, different things like that.
Right.
Okay.
And some people actually are already well off.
Yeah.
What they came into. So we're talking about somebody who's not necessarily well off. And so I stop and I say, it's all about planning. It's all about understanding what you can do. And sometimes there's an adjustment, because a man can lose his job at any time.
True.
And if he loses his job, what are you going to do? You're going to find a way. The idea in any marriage, any relationship, any time that you plan on having children, is to put yourself in the best possible position.
Of course.
And so the idea is that if you're going to, if you understand that you're going to have a child and the woman was part of supporting the family, you know, this is 2019. Now you got disability insurance just for such an occasion. You can start to save money however you do. You can work a second job, but you want to make sure that you cover that period so that while you're out, there's not a fall off of that period, as opposed to now, you know, I just got finished watching the Yahweh Ben Yahweh documentary.
Oh, so you watched it too?
Yeah, I did.
Oh my, I was gonna, yeah, I was. Oh my gosh.
So he had, you know, what we have termed as welfare pimps. So it said they were stealing, you know, thousands of dollars in public funds because the father was there.
Yeah.
Wasn't working, and they were collecting child support. I mean, not child support. They were collecting welfare.
Yeah. And the men were living in a different room so that when the people came by, they wouldn't see the men.
Right. But the father was right there. And so, you know, not that I'm against welfare, but there is a space for welfare. What we have to do is be responsible adults. If you're going to live a polygynous lifestyle, understand that there's a certain amount of sacrifice.
Yeah.
And within that sacrifice, I point to the Holy Scriptures with Jacob. Jacob understood he had 4 wives. He was taking care of his uncle's flock, and he was taking care of his own flock.
Yeah.
And obviously, to take care of 2 different flocks, and they were 3 days apart from each other, there was a certain amount of sacrifice that his wives had to understand, and that he had to understand of him working hard in order for him to eventually establish his own, which he got to. And so what I'm saying is that when you have situations like this in polygyny, as long as there's an end to this, not that this is your normal way of life, but there's an end to this. It's like, hey, listen, I'm working hard right now, but we will get to a point where we're good, and then it'll work out for everybody.
Okay. All right. So question number 17. Question number 16. How do wives get child and spousal support if the relationship breaks down and the marriage was not recognized by the state? We know that if it's with polygamy or polygyny, most of those marriages won't be recognized by the state because that's illegal, at least here in the state of New York. So how do they get child and spousal support if that relationship breaks down?
Okay, so 1, child and spousal support, when you have to go to court, is based on the fact that somebody did not want to pay what they felt they were worth. And so I'll go back to that communication that we started in the beginning.
Okay.
Sometimes marriages don't work. Divorce is an option that the Most High God gave us. So he understood that there's sometimes we would get with people and that things would happen. You should be able to sit down and talk about it.
Wait a second. You're talking about divorce, and this is just to say, for the purpose of the listener, you identify as a Hebrew Israelite.
Correct.
So therefore, when you say the scripture, you're talking about what Christians would call the Old Testament.
Correct.
Because in the New Testament, of course, well, even the Old Testament says God hates divorce.
Right.
But in the New Testament, there's only one excuse for the divorce, and that's unfaithfulness. But in the Old Testament, that's what you're referring to when you say that there is a place for divorce.
Right. Provisions. That's
Okay.
the word I wanted to use. So I stop and I say, you should be able to sit down and talk about it, and it should be fair and it should be reasonable. And that in the absence of the man wanting to do the right thing, then there should be some type of mediation, or in the essence of where the man doesn't want to pay anything.
Yeah.
You need to be taken to court. Somebody needs to garnish or pay for that.
But what kind of recourse would a woman have? She's not legally married according to the state, and how is she even bringing him to court?
So, of course, I keep talking about this Hebrew Israelite thing. There should be some form of judgment system that we all have. You're not a nation unless you have rules. It just doesn't work out like that.
Yeah.
So that if you're not recognized by the state and he's just a bum, that is
or he's
a form
vindictive, or whatever the reason happens to be.
then that recourse is appropriate. And I have no two ways about stating that to men. You made a child. You have a responsibility to that child. You have a lifetime responsibility to that child. And it's more than just money. Said, however, in the monetary aspect, she deserves something.
So she should take him to court for the child support, although the spousal support would probably wouldn't be granted because the court wouldn't see her as a spouse.
So, I tell you, there's so many layers to this. Because we would have to have a discussion about what spousal support is and what either one of them are entitled to. Because spousal support shouldn't just go one way, right? So you can have a situation where she comes in with more than he has, and he may want custody of the child.
That seems to go against the male ego you talked about recently. So I'm surprised whenever men ask for that in the first place.
It actually goes into
it seems like
ego.
male ego. The male ego discussion is when it's convenient.
That's control.
Ain't no ego.
It's control. Give me my child. Pay me to take care of my child and all of that, because this is my child. I made this child, right? But we're not going to get into that. My point is that, when you speak of spousal support, when you speak of child support, that's based on, who's making more money, who has custody of the child, who deserves custody of the child, and things of that nature. And then, what I find funny is that's when I see where women want to be. It's like, oh, this is my child. I nurture this child. I held the child for 9 months and all that other stuff. Where, in my opinion, it can swing either way.
Yeah.
However, I never think just because a man and a woman are splitting up, I never think that you should get to a point where you start talking about an unfit parent.
Yeah.
Which, unfortunately, that's where the conversation goes.
Yeah.
Who's more capable of raising this child, where it took two of y'all at first to do this, and it really took more than two. It took the village. It took the village, but that's what you're dealing with. So it's a tough question. I would say to answer it clearly, there's no definitive answer to that. Each situation would have to be looked at separately, but there's something should be given to one of the parents of whoever is taking care of the child. And I don't believe in what you came in you should leave out with.